This is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham and Japheth, and sons were born to them after the flood. My name's Arthur. Thank you for joining me as we turn to Genesis chapter 10, the chapter that's called the Table of Nations. For we've been told in chapter 9 that from these three all the nations of the earth are derived, all the peoples of the earth. The whole earth was populated from Shem, Ham and Japheth. And the initial lines of those nations are listed here. And these are ancient names. Since this time, people have moved around so that people no longer are exactly in the original territories, because there's been many movements of people over time. But we see in this the distribution of people around the world after the flood. Well, let's read the first portion of Genesis chapter 10. Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham and Japheth. And sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach and Tiraz. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Riphath and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his own language, according to their families, into their nations. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabteka. And the sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Rezin, between Nineveh and Calah. That is the principal city. Mizraim begot Ludim, Ananim, and Lehabim, Naphtuhim, Pathrasim, Caslusim, from whom came the Philistines, and Captorim. Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, the Amorite, and the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Arkite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, the Semirite, and the Hamathite. Afterward the families of the Canaanites were dispersed, and the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon as you go towards Gerar, as far as Gaza, then as you go towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lasha. These were the sons of Ham, according to their families, according to their languages, in their lands, and in their nations. May the Lord bless these words to us. There are a few things that we can highlight here. In our previous discussion in chapter 9, Ham was called the younger in verse 24. And in our reading today, Japheth is called the elder, with reference to Shem. So it would seem that when they are listed together, we have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. In fact, Japheth was the oldest, Shem was second, and Ham was the youngest. But in terms of the story, Shem takes precedence, because the godly line leading to the Lord Jesus came through him, even though this account was written thousands of years before Jesus was born. It was written by the godly family, and the godly line came down through Shem. Some of these names keep recurring in the Bible. So names like Gomer, Magog, Javan, Meshach, and Togarmah appear in later scriptures because these family groups continue to be important. So the families of Japheth are identified with the European nations, the Russian nations. Those people moved north after the flood and occupied that northern area. Javan is identified with the Greeks. Tarshish becomes identified with Britain, but the story was that they first settled in Troy and then moved to Britain later. And there's a fascinating book, After the Flood, by Bill Cooper, which is available from Creation Ministries International, creationontheweb.com, and it outlines the history carried down in Britain through the line of the kings of Britain and the ancient writings of Britain of the connection Tarshish with the British Isles. But in the scriptures it is justified with the connection of tin being brought from Tarshish, and the tin mines of the ancient world were in Britain. So we're told that from these the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated. After the flood, the people moved along the coasts to separate the various areas, and the sea level was low, while on the land we had the Ice Age that built huge amounts of ice on the inland continents. So as people moved around, they followed the coastline, and so the coastlines of their lands is mentioned here. And of course at that stage the Arctic Ocean was not frozen over, so that provided a connection around the northern countries of Scotland and Norway around to North America. It's fascinating that they have found links between the Spanish and the North American Indians. So that's Japheth. We moved to Ham, and they basically went south. Cush is the name of modern Ethiopia. Mizraim was the name of Egypt. Put is the ancient name of Libya. So these people moved south into that continent. But there's also families of them that remained in the Middle Eastern area, and Nimrod set himself up and built his kingdoms. Babel, Erech, Akkad, Kelnar, Shinar, and Nineveh were built in Mesopotamia. Now verse 11 is interesting. It says, "From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, and Kelnar." But the King James Bible says that Asher went out and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, and Kelnar. My Hebrew friends say they prefer that reading rather than this one. In other words, that territory was divided, and along the river, Asher, who was a descendant of Shem, built alternative cities as opposed to the cities that Nimrod built, which became the focus of idolatry. And this mention of Babel leading to Babylon, Nimrod began the worship of Babel, which carries through and is the subject of judgment in the book of Revelation.